Most closure never arrives in the mail. It's something you learn to make at home. Sometimes it looks almost too simple to count. A quiet kitchen, a drawer you haven't opened in a while, an old photo, a letter, a name that still pulls at your chest the way it always has. You hold it for a moment, not to punish yourself, not to relive the whole thing, just to acknowledge it. Then you put it back. You close the drawer, and you stand there, still you, still breathing, without a big speech, without a dramatic ending. That's how real life ends chapters, not with music swelling, just with a hand letting go. Tonight's letter is about making peace without the answers you wanted and learning to close doors from the inside. If you've been waiting for an apology, an explanation, a final conversation, I know that wait. It can feel like if you could just hear the right words, everything would finally settle. If you could just understand why they did what they did, you'd stop replaying it in your head at night. We were taught that closure is something someone gives you, but as you get older, you start noticing something. Some people don't know how to tell the truth. Some people don't know how to take responsibility. And some people, no matter how much you deserve it, will never hand you a clean ending. So what do you do with a story that doesn't finish properly? For a long time you stand in the doorway hoping it will. And then one day you get tired. Not bitter, just tired. You realize that waiting for someone else to complete your story keeps you tied to them. It keeps the wound open, like you're checking it every day to see if it finally healed. And you don't want to live like that anymore. Some doors don't close. You just stop standing in them. In the next part, I want to talk about the myth we were sold, that every story gets a perfect ending, and why real life, especially later in life, asks something different from us. We grew up with a certain promise baked into the stories we were told. If something hurts, it will eventually make sense. If someone wrongs you, they will realize it, regret it, and come back with the right words. If a chapter ends, it ends neatly, like a book you can close and place back on the shelf. But real life isn't a movie. People walk out mid-sentence. They change without warning. They leave you holding questions that don't have a return address. And the older you get, the more obvious it becomes. A lot of endings don't explain themselves. A friendship can end over something that looked small on the surface. A holiday that used to feel warm suddenly feels sharp. A family relationship shifts and never quite returns. Not because one moment mattered so much, but because that moment revealed what had been there all along. I think about a friend I once had. We were close in that comfortable, everyday way. We knew each other's routines. We knew each other's moods before they were spoken. Then one day, a misunderstanding happened. Nothing dramatic, nothing worth losing a whole history over. At least, that's what I told myself. I waited for the phone call that would fix it. I rehearsed what I would say when we finally talked. I imagined the tidy ending. We were both stressed. We didn't mean it. Let's move on. But the call didn't come. Weeks became months, and months became years. And what I finally understood was this: sometimes the last conversation isn't the real ending. Sometimes the real ending is the fact that someone chose distance and never turned back. And even if they had called with a perfect explanation, it wouldn't have changed what happened in the part of you that felt dismissed. That's an important difference, especially with age. An explanation isn't the same as repair. People will tell you why they did what they did. They might even tell you a story that makes them look human, wounded, complicated, and you might understand it. But understanding someone doesn't automatically heal you. And understanding someone doesn't automatically mean they're safe to keep close. You can understand someone and still not want them back. That's a grown-up kind of wisdom that doesn't always get celebrated because it's quiet. When you're younger, you spend more time trying to figure people out. You collect details, motives, psychology. You want the logic that will stop the ache. But with age, you start seeing that the ache isn't always about not understanding. Sometimes the ache is simply grief. Grief that things didn't turn out kinder. Grief that someone couldn't meet you with the care you deserved. Grief that a chapter ended without the ending you would have chosen. And in grief, there isn't always a satisfying explanation. There's just reality. That's why chasing closure can be so exhausting. You're not just chasing answers. You're chasing a version of the past where it didn't hurt as much. And no one can hand you that. So in the next part, I want to talk about what happens when an older heart gets tired of waiting. Why, with age, you begin valuing peace more than answers. And how that shift can quietly set you free. There's a kind of waiting that looks harmless from the outside. You go to work, you pay your bills, you do the normal things, you smile at people, you show up. But inside, you keep a little chair pulled up to the same old conversation. You replay it in the shower. You replay it on long drives. You replay it when the house gets quiet at night. What you should have said. What they should have said. What it would take for it to finally feel finished. And the truth is, waiting like that doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like hope. It feels like you're being fair. Like you're giving them time to come around. Like you're leaving the door unlocked just in case they show up with the right words. But with age, you start noticing what that hope is costing you. Because waiting keeps you tied to the thing that hurt you. It keeps a thread running from your present day back to the past. And every time you tug it, you feel the same ache again. Closure is freedom. Waiting is a leash. When you're younger, you can spend years in that leash and call it patience. You have more energy for the back and forth in your head, more appetite for drama, even the quiet kind. More belief that if you just try one more time, it will become the ending you want. But as you get older, your energy gets precious. Not because you're weak, because you're wise. You start seeing your time the way you see money after you've worked hard for it. You stop wasting it. You stop spending it on imaginary conversations with people who aren't even in the room. I remember sitting in my car one afternoon after a simple errand. Grocery bags in the back seat, sunlight coming through the windshield, and out of nowhere, I realized I had been replaying the same conversation for years. Same scene, same lines, same ending that never happened. And I thought, almost with surprise, how long have I been paying rent to a memory? That's what waiting can become. You keep a room in your life occupied by someone who no longer lives there. You keep setting a place at the table for an apology that isn't coming. And then, slowly, with age, something inside you gets tired of that. Not angry, just done. You begin to choose peace over answers, because answers don't always help the way we think they will. Sometimes you get the explanation and still feel hollow. Sometimes you get the apology and realize it doesn't reach the part of you that needed protection back then. And sometimes you never get anything at all. So you stop asking for the key. At some point, you stop asking for the key and build a new door. That's what older hearts learn. They learn to stop negotiating with the past. They learn to stop calling the same number just to hear it ring. They learn that moving forward doesn't require permission. It requires a decision. And in the next part, I want to talk about that decision, what closing from the inside really means, and how it can feel both gentle and strong at the same time. When people hear the word closure, they imagine a conversation. Someone finally admits what they did. Someone finally apologizes. Someone finally explains the part that never made sense. And yes, sometimes that happens. But a lot of the time, it doesn't. So, closing from the inside means you stop waiting for their performance. You stop needing them to play a role in your healing. It doesn't mean you pretend it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean you rewrite history into something pretty. It means you tell the truth plainly, without begging anyone to agree with it. This hurt. It mattered. And it ended. That's closure, the grown-up kind. Not because the story became fair, because you stopped letting it run your life. Sometimes closing from the inside looks like a box. Not a dramatic box, just an ordinary one. You gather the things tied to that chapter. Old letters, photos, a ticket stub, a small gift that once felt sweet and now feels sharp. And as you sort through it, you notice something. Some of those items still carry a charge. Your stomach tightens. Your throat gets a little dry. Your mind tries to pull you back into the old movie again. But you don't have to watch it all the way through anymore. You can set the item down. You can say, quietly, yes, that happened. Then you decide where it belongs. Not because you're trying to erase it, but because you're choosing where it lives in your life now. Maybe it goes in a box on a high shelf. Maybe it goes to a donation pile. Maybe it goes in the trash. Not out of hatred, out of clarity. That's what age gives you when you let it. The ability to stop romanticizing what broke you. The ability to stop chasing what never fed you. The ability to keep your dignity. Because closure isn't just about ending a story. It's about ending the part where you keep handing your peace to someone who didn't protect it. You don't need permission to move on. That sentence sounds simple, but for some people it's like learning a new language. Because you were raised to be considerate, to give people chances, to talk it out, to be the bigger person. And those things are good until they become a trap. Until being reasonable turns into abandoning yourself. Closing from the inside means you stop using your own tenderness against yourself. It means you stop saying, if they would just understand, and start saying, I understand enough. And here's something important. Closure does not require hatred. It can be gentle. It can be a calm decision made on an ordinary afternoon. You can lay something down without getting an explanation for why it was heavy. You can bless the ending without understanding it. You can stop reopening the door just to see if it still hurts, because it will, and you're tired of paying that price. In the next part, I want to show you what closure often looks like in real life. Quiet, ordinary moments in America that don't look like much until you realize they're you choosing your peace. Closure, the real kind, usually doesn't happen in a dramatic conversation. It happens in small choices that look almost boring to anyone else. It happens on an ordinary Tuesday. You drive to a place you haven't been in years, an old neighborhood, a familiar park, a diner you used to love. And you sit for a moment, not to punish yourself, not to chase a feeling, just to prove to yourself that you can be there and still be okay. You look around, you notice what's changed, you notice what hasn't. Then you leave peacefully. No grand moment, just you, walking back to your car with your dignity intact. That's closure. Sometimes closure looks like a donation box in the trunk, a suit you wore during a chapter of your life that demanded too much from you, a set of dishes that belonged to a marriage that ended, a stack of hobby supplies for a dream that never became what you thought it would be. You don't throw them away in anger. You simply admit, "This is not my present anymore," and you pass it on. Sometimes closure looks like deleting a phone number, not because you hate them, because you've realized you reach for that number when you're lonely, and you end up lonelier afterward. So you remove the shortcut. You stop letting your weakest moment decide your next one. Sometimes closure looks like a library book return. You slide the book into the slot and hear that small thump as it disappears. It's almost nothing, but there's something honest about it. This chapter is no longer in my hands. Sometimes closure looks like sitting in a quiet church or a quiet room, even if you're not the religious type. Just sitting still. Maybe you light a candle. Maybe you don't. You say a few simple words in your own way, words you needed to say years ago and never got to. I loved you. You hurt me. I'm done carrying this. And when you stand up, you don't feel magically healed. You just feel a little lighter. Sometimes closure looks like cooking a recipe that reminds you of someone. For a long time you avoided it because it brought too much back. Then one day you make it anyway. You stand at the stove. You smell the familiar smell. You let the memory visit without letting it take over the whole house. You taste it. You swallow. And you realize you can hold love and loss in the same hand without breaking. Sometimes closure looks like writing something you never send. A card, a note, a few lines on plain paper. Not for them, for you. You write the truth without trying to sound polite. Then you fold it and put it away. Or you tear it up. Either way, you've stopped carrying the words around in your body. That's a kind of mercy. And what I want you to notice about all of these is this. You're not waiting for someone else to do the right thing. You're doing the kind thing for yourself. You're not slamming doors. You're simply stopping the habit of reopening them. You don't need a perfect ending to have a peaceful life. You just need a decision you can live with. Closure often looks like an ordinary Tuesday. And if you've lived long enough, you know there's a quiet power in ordinary days. In the next part, I want to talk about the hardest part of all. When you still want one last conversation, one last explanation, one last apology. And how to handle that longing without handing your peace back to the past. Even after everything I've said, there's still that longing that can rise up on certain nights. Just one last conversation. Just one honest sentence from them. Just something that says, "Yes, I see what I did. Yes, it mattered." That longing doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. Most of us don't want revenge. We want to be understood. We want the story to feel fair. And when you don't get that, your mind keeps trying to fix it the only way it knows how, by imagining the conversation that would make it make sense. But here's something age teaches you, slowly and sometimes painfully. Not every last conversation is healing. Some last conversations are just fresh wounds with a new date on them. Because the person you want closure from may not be capable of meeting you where you are now. You've grown. You've steadied. You've learned how to speak more plainly. They may still be living in denial, or defensiveness, or the version of themselves that needs to be right. And if you go back looking for a clean ending, you might get the same old ending again. Not because you did it wrong, because that's all they have to offer. Some people can't meet you where you healed to. That sentence can be heartbreaking the first time you really accept it. But it can also be freeing, because it explains why you keep feeling disappointed. You're looking for water in a dry well. I've watched people pick up the phone, not even because they missed the person, but because they missed the fantasy. The fantasy that this time will be different. This time, they'll finally understand. This time, you'll finally say the perfect thing. And then they hang up feeling worse than before, because now the old pain is awake again. So what do you do when you still want that one last talk? Sometimes you give yourself the words you wanted to hear. Not in a cheesy way, not in a fake way, in a plain, honest way. You sit with the truth. I deserved better than that. You let that be enough. You tell yourself, what happened was real, even if they deny it. You let that be enough. You tell yourself, I don't need their agreement to trust my own memory. You let that be enough. Because the last word isn't always the last piece. Sometimes the last piece is you closing your phone, turning off the light, and choosing not to reopen that door tonight. Sometimes the last piece is you deciding that your nervous system doesn't need another round. Sometimes the last piece is you choosing the life in front of you over the story behind you. And if you're carrying a name in your heart right now, someone you still wish would come through with the right words, I want you to hear this gently. You are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to move forward without being understood. You are allowed to have peace without a perfect ending. In the closing, I want to leave you with one final thought, something you can carry the next time your mind tries to drag you back into that doorway. If closure never comes from them, it can still come for you. Not as a gift they hand you, but as a decision you make. A calm decision made in the privacy of your own life. Because at some point, you realize you've been holding your peace like it's a hostage, waiting for the right words, the right apology, the right explanation to set it free. And the truth is, your peace doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you. Some endings don't explain themselves. They just ask you to stop carrying them. So if there's a chapter in your life that still feels unfinished, someone who never owned what they did, a relationship that ended without the kindness you deserved, a goodbye that never really got said. Here's what I hope you'll remember. You can let it be incomplete without letting it control you. You can tell the truth to yourself, even if no one else ever admits it. You can stop standing in the doorway, waiting for the past to become polite. And when you're ready, you can close the door from the inside, not with anger, with clarity, not with a slam, with a steady hand. If this letter felt familiar, you're not alone here. And if you'd like, tell me in the comments what's something you've made peace with, even without answers. Take what helps, leave the rest.